The permits, earlier today, we approved a process of taking permits off the books. So I think that the occupancy is just so crucial. That's the real number, right? It doesn't matter how many are pulled, it's how many are built. The arena numbers and all this stuff is really important, but one of the issues that is bothersome to me is no one's asking about the true need of the community, because there isn't anywhere I go that people aren't saying, I wish there was more housing. I'm having a hard time finding a place. There's not enough places to rent. There's not enough places to own. It's not affordable. And that's a supply issue. And while I get that we're going through this exercise, and it's part of it, I think the real number that we should all be focused on, at least I'm focused on this board, is meeting the needs of the community. With that said, we had talked about earlier in the year, I had asked that we do a parcel level analysis of the VMT, because so much of the numbers we're looking at here was prior to VMT in the cycle before all the new stuff came. And while our numbers are great in some levels moving forward today, that's not under the VMT rules. These are all things that were grandfathered in that have come to fruition. Are we close, or when do you think that we'll have an idea on the parcel level analysis of VMT?
Thank you, Supervisor. So our first step since receiving the board's direction was to develop a methodology for the parcel by parcel analysis. We expect to return to the board with an update on that methodology in June or summer of this year. And so based upon that, we will then continue the analysis and come back to the board with a full, completed look at parcel by parcels.
And to me, that's very important because, and I'm saying this for my constituents who are watching this meeting, all four of them, my wife included, that when we looked at some of the parcels, and I used the example of Spring Valley because that used to be in my district and I was more familiar, we had counted it as 9 units when actually the person would have to tear their home down in order to build the 9 units, which rolls me into the next point. In your presentation, you talked about by right approval. And I think that that's a crucial factor in everything that we're moving forward, because if I have to go through a bunch of hoops, the likelihood, if my margins are tight, I'm building this, I'm not gonna risk a lot of money thinking that I could be held up for years waiting for approval, not necessarily from us, but from lawsuits and everything else. The by right is crucial in predicting real numbers. And I was wondering, because we had talked about that too, is June a good time to be thinking in terms of you all having that number as well? Because I think that by right would probably be very close in analysis to the VMT analysis that you're doing.
It's close. I think we will return shortly after, sometime in September, with options for the by right approval programs. Supervisor, we began work on the by right program last summer when the board adopted the housing element. And there is a state requirement for by right approvals for a subset of the RENA sites, in which it will take about a 3-year process to get all the environmental documentation, go through the process to bring that back to the board for approval. Based upon board direction, we went a step further to look at how can we expand that by right program to all RENA sites, to also looking at mixed use development on commercial sites. And it's that piece that we hope to come back to you with some options later this year.
By the way, I appreciate it, and that's great work. This is not discouraging, I'm encouraged, and I'm glad that you're on it. And then I have another question, and you may or may not be able to answer this, but when thinking about very low and low housing units that were constructed in 2021, how many were constructed? And by the way, when I say District 2 and District 5, I'm talking about the old districts, right? Because the new districts are completely different. But how many of them were constructed outside of those 2 districts? I don't know if you have that number, but if you do, that'd be very helpful.
We do have the data, Supervisor, and out of the total of 1,400 permits issued, Approximately 54 of those were issued outside of districts 2 and 5. And of those 54, 2 of them were in the, I believe, in the low category.
Okay. So 52 at the low housing and 2 at the very low housing. So the reason why I was asking about this is I have a real concern. Everyone talks about RENA numbers, but nobody's really building. And now we're looking at VMT, and we're shutting down all the opportunity in my old District 2, for the most part. We went from the RENA numbers when I first got elected of 18, just shy of 18,000 to fewer than 3,000 of total homes, not just low and very low. And now we can proudly say 54. And I'm not blaming you all. That's not, I mean, this is state law. This is the county. I mean, this is beyond our control. But as we move forward, I think it's disingenuous for me to be telling my district that we're really seriously taking this on when we have so little to show for it, and we don't have a possibility in the future of doing more. And so one of the things that I'd like to suggest to this board, and I don't know if you all would be open to it, but we've set the bar on, and I think that we've set the bar when you look at regional decarbonization. I mean, we have grabbed that by the horns and really tried to lead the way. On this housing, we should be doing the same. We should be leading the way, and we should be holding people accountable. And my concern is we're building all this infrastructure, and let me just tell you, the whole time I campaigned, not one of my constituents came up to me, and even now when I'm in the district, and said, my commute to work is too short. My commute to the grocery store or shopping is too short. No one's saying, hey, I want to commute longer. And yet, we see people from Riverside commuting for jobs down here because we have failed to provide the housing necessary. So what I'm going to suggest, and I'd like to amend this in this if it's possible, it may be that I have to bring it back as a board letter, but I'd love for staff to make a regional housing workshop, invite Sandag, and invite all the cities and communities to come to this to talk about it. Because here's the deal. We've gone through this, and we've said, well, you know, those coastal communities where they have mass transit and they have easy access, they're going to build these low-income houses. They're not. And if they are, I want to hear it, but I want to put them on record. Because everyone says they're going to do stuff, and yet I have constituent after constituent with no place to go housing-wise. And so I want to do my due diligence to hold it. We've been very transparent, and we've been working hard. But we need to see it coming from other communities. When we showed the examples, most of those examples were from my district or my old district. And I'm just thinking, if we shut down my old district through VMT and nobody steps up, what we're saying is there's no equity for these low and very low, because it's not going to get done. I mean, even on our best day, we did 54. We can do better. I know we can do better. So, you know, I'd love for us to host it. And you know what, I don't want to jump ahead to staff. Maybe, Sarah, you could speak to this. But I think having everybody in the same room and having Sandag explain, and then have everybody say, yeah, we'll commit to these many houses. Yeah, we will. But for us to turn around and lower our numbers because of Sandag and have nobody meet us halfway, this is a failed policy. And look, you know, I've tried to be as supportive as possible on all these things because I want a better community. I want better things. But I'm not going to lie to my constituents and say that this is an earnest effort that has a chance of building homes for them when there's no possibility because the game's rigged against them. And I think that we have a chance. So that's
yeah, just one thing. We didn't lower our numbers. The numbers are set by Sandag. The county, we didn't decide to lower our RENA numbers. That's a process, the state process that our MPO administers. But let me go to Supervisor Wasserman real quick for thoughts on workshop on housing.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, I think it's pretty clear we all agree. I spoke on this. You know, Supervisor Vargas spoke on this. That we're all, you know, very concerned about the lack of construction of very low housing. I mean, that's what the graph showed. I think it's very clear that this is a problem. I'm working really hard on this, right? You know, I've started this regional equitable housing subcommittee at Sandag, you know, trying to figure out how do we create those incentives, how do we create funding, how do we get those commitments. This has to be a priority. I just want to, I think that there's a piece of how you outlined your proposal that I don't really follow. You know, I think what you said was, look, looking back, we haven't done a very good job on our meeting our very low commitments. And I think that's true. We haven't. And that was true before and prior to any kind of VMT policy. So if you're looking for causal relationships, clearly, like, you can't have a causal relationship that's creating a housing crisis from a policy that never previously existed. And I think it's important to therefore acknowledge that the solutions are going to come from a different spot. And if I'd be more than happy, you know, to work on a regional housing workshop through Sandag, but I think that's the appropriate body to do it. I think it's a little out of our lane as a county. If we wanted to as the county, call on Sandag to put that together, I would be happy to support that. I think that the thing I want to say, and I think it's important to say it really, like, in a really honest way, I don't think a workshop's going to make a difference. I mean, I think this is a real problem. I think it's going to take real investment, real resources. That's what Chair Fletcher identified, that the market is not going to solve this problem on its own. And it's going to take us stepping forward with resources, with incentives to get that housing built. And, you know, we know cities talk all day about housing numbers. If you want to have another talk shop, I'm not going to block that, but I'm much more interested in real solutions. So I think that what I would say is, if I would be happy to support an amendment to this motion that asks Sandag to convene some kind of regional housing workshop. I think that, you know, don't think there's a problem with that, but I don't think that's a solution. I think we need to be much bolder and broader and bigger and transformative than just a workshop.
Thank you. Vice Chair Vargas.
Thank you. I actually, I do think that Sandag is doing an exceptional work around that particular issue, and I think that the work that you're leading there is the work that needs to happen in that space. But I think that we play a very unique role as a county board of supervisors, having been elected by our constituents, to really think about what does housing look for us, right, as a board. So there's Sandag, and then there's the 18 cities and their representatives, and then what are we looking at as well, and what can we do together? And then what can we advocate? And as we're looking at the Office of Economic Prosperity and Community Development, as we're looking at the Air Pollution Control District, as we're looking at Sandag, all these different entities that we are part of the County of San Diego, where do they interact? Where are we investing? How are we advocating for federal funding, state funding, where we can actually advocate, and then also to have input from our communities and what the greater needs are. So I don't think it would be a bad idea to have an actual workshop during one of the meetings like we've had before, just to hear from our communities. And I don't think I think it adds on. I don't think it's separate from what, like, the Sandag work that is being done. I think that the work that you're leading, I think, is really important for the county as a whole, and what. But I think it adds to what you're doing, not takes away from it, I think. So I don't think you need an amendment, in my opinion. But
yeah, I think go. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Vice Chair. No, doing a workshop, we could just do. I mean, we could figure out, we could document a thing and do a time certain workshop. I don't think we have to amend anything here. I think we could just, if there's a consensus we want to do that, we could work together to figure out how to docket something, have various groups come in and present and kind of drive that discussion. So I think that's certainly something that's infinitely doable and fairly easy. But let me go to Supervisor Desmond, and I'll go back to Supervisor Anderson.
Thank you. And Supervisor Anderson, I appreciate your comments on that. I don't know if another workshop's going to do it. And communities, to try to get a community to commit to, we're going to build this many houses. Communities don't build houses. Developers do. And so we got to incentivize the development community. We have to incentivize the development community with dollars to build the lower income housing. And we got to figure out how to do that. And then we put in requirements for it, either inclusionary housing or by right kind of scares me, but depending on how it's done. But let's set the example instead of, you didn't do it, so we're not going to do it. Screw that. Just we do it. So why don't we do it? We got to make sure that housing dollars, if we're going to put more money into the housing, we put it into the, you get more money if you put in more of the lower income housing. I mean, it's pretty simple, but
Supervisor Desmond, but I think that's why I want us to have a workshop, because I think the only way we've been thinking about building housing is that developers are the only people who build housing, and I think we need to stop thinking about it that way. I think that we need to think about housing from a different perspective as well, and we've seen other models that work really well. There's all different types of developers that build housing. I mean, not just developers for profit. And so, and I know everybody's going to freak out right now who's listening to this. So, there's a space for them, but there's also different models that work, so that we're looking at rent-to-own homes. We're looking at different models of housing that can really work for our communities. Because right now, if we look at the RENA numbers and who's buying these homes, what are we building? We're not building for regular people to be able to buy homes. A home right now in my district is about $750,000, $800,000. People who make regular wages cannot afford a house in San Diego County right now. And so I'm really concerned about the housing that we're trying to build in San Diego right now, and where affordable housing is being built is not in my district, and it's for sure not in Supervisor Anderson's district either. And so I want us to have a real conversation, not just about building homes, you know, and just building homes to build numbers, to meet our numbers. I want us to have a real conversation about how do we build homes so that people who live in San Diego, who want to stay in San Diego, can afford to live in these homes based on the jobs that they have in these communities. And I don't think we can have that conversation outside of, you know,
well,
issue right now.
and,
So
and to achieve that, we have to incentivize to do that and then regulate, unfortunately, and to do that. And so, and I know everybody talks about their district, but this is the unincorporated area that we're talking about up here. This is the unincorporated areas, and I know everybody has a piece of that now. But anyway, let's set the example, get it done, and as opposed to.
I think in some parts too. I mean, so much of what we're doing goes beyond just the unincorporated, though. I mean, we have a lot of housing on county-owned land in incorporated cities. And it's, again, we don't get the RENA credit for it, but it's still housing that people can do. So, all right, we'll go back to Supervisor Anderson. I think we'll land the plane on this one.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair Fletcher. What hit me was your original point about holding the region accountable. So in my mind, there are three things that need to be addressed. One, that there's a benchmark holding not just the county accountable, but the whole region. So we can do our best on our own, and if it doesn't affect change in the other cities, we've not accomplished what we need to do for the region. And so the reason why I like the idea of doing this with Sandag and having the other cities is, you know, I don't know, but when was the last time low income or super low income housing went in for Encinitas, Solana Beach, or Del Mar? And that's okay, but if they never are going to do it, and that's okay, then it has to be done somewhere. And if Sandag gets everybody in the room and they all say, yes, we believe that we can build this with our RENA numbers, then great, there's a commitment and there's a timeline and we're meeting the needs of the region. If they say no, then let's rethink and reimagine what that future looks like. At one point, there was a trolley going to Ramona. And I'm not saying there has to be a trolley going to Ramona, but maybe we're thinking about this wrong and saying, maybe we extend the trolley to Lakeside, and then Lakeside has the opportunity to build the homes that no coastal community is going to do because perhaps the price of the land is just so expensive it's prohibitive. But the notion that we're going to keep saying, well, we're doing our part, but we're not holding anybody else accountable. You know, we all ran, and I'm saying this in the kindest of ways, we ran to improve our communities. I've not met anybody in elected office that doesn't want to improve their community. And I just think about the needs in my community, and I'm thinking, we're all going to continue to go through the motion, and we're never going to affect change. Having everybody to commit, having everybody on record is important because now you have a benchmark to measure them against in the next election. Are they moving the ball, or are they just talking about it? And when I look at how far we've come, and I look at the VMT and Supervisor Lawson-Remer, I agree with her. I'm not saying that VMT is the reason for the failed policy, but seeing our future numbers reduced in my old district from just under 18,000 to under 3,000, I can't ignore that. That's a fact. So then how do we change that? Well, maybe we change the future of what mass transit looks like, and we project moving there, and we build to that and have it grow together. I want to have a solution. And I think that too often people want to just get through. And Chair Fletcher, you and I both witnessed in Sacramento, kicking the can is what we do best in the legislature. We kick it down. We know we're in term limits. All we have to do is kick it beyond our term limit, and then somebody else's problem. Well, I didn't like it in Sacramento, and I certainly don't want to do it here, and that's why in Lawson Reamer, Supervisor, I will be reaching out to you because I think that we need to do it. But we got to get people on record so that we can hold them accountable, because if they say we're not going to build it, I'm okay with it. But let's accommodate the people we do represent.
I don't think anyone would say they're not going to build it because there's a state requirement you do it. The question is, if you say you do it, do you actually do it or not? And there's states been stepping up enforcement on that. Let's go to Supervisor Lawson Reamer. Final thoughts on this item.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think I appreciate this conversation because I think it does reveal both some really clear commonalities in terms of priorities and some pretty significant differences, right? I think one thing that's really clear is that we're all really committed to affordable housing and to tackling affordable housing in our region. It's a priority I've heard from every single person sitting up here. But I do think from my perspective, I agree with Supervisor Desmond that this is not going to happen because elected officials stand up and make commitments. This is going to happen because we create incentives for private developers or some other kinds of developers, as Supervisor Vargas pointed out. The sort of universe of the type of folks who can build housing is bigger than maybe we've necessarily thought. But in any case, we have to make it pencil at the end of the day. We're not going to solve our housing crisis because we get a bunch of elected officials in the room to make speeches about how they're going to fulfill RHNA numbers. We're going to make it happen because we make it pencil for developers to actually build. And I think that incentive piece is really important. It's what I hope to see you all kind of focus on and come back with about how we can put our money where our mouth is, make incentives really work to get to those very low numbers that we're not hitting in our RHNA targets. But just I think as a regional issue, we have a choice as a region, right? We either say, look, we care about climate, we care about environment, we care about making sure people can live close to where they work and where schools and facilities are, and that they're not, driving many, many hours every single day. And therefore, if that's what we care about, we do need to do the work to create incentives for cities to build in cities. And I think that's not happening, and it's creating pressure in our unincorporated areas, and that is work we need to do, but it's not going to just happen because, we got a bunch of mayors say, hey, I'm going to build these numbers. We actually need to kind of figure out what are the mechanisms, what are the financing mechanisms to enable the building to happen in those cities. And I think that, to me, is where the hard work lies. And I think the other approach is giving up. It's to say, look, well, we can't figure out how to help developers do the right thing. So we're going to pave over all our open spaces. We're going to build in the middle of nowhere so people are stuck driving in traffic for hours to get to school and to get to work. And I personally refuse to do that. I think it's both and. I think that we can build affordable housing in ways that are walkable, livable, environmentally sustainable, that are mixed use, mixed income, and support people to live really high quality lives, near their families, near their jobs. And, to the extent that we care about this issue, we have to acknowledge it is hard. This is not going to happen easily. If it was going to happen easily, it would have happened already. And it's not going to happen without a lot of innovation and creativity in figuring out how to change the structure of the market. I don't think it's going to happen just because more elected officials make promises. So I think I just wanted to take a moment to just really call out how difficult this is. And I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to sort of grapple with and struggle with these issues together with colleagues who I think want to get to some solutions. And I really appreciate staff and your ability and your focus on trying to come up with some of those mechanisms. And I do want to say it is partly about us doing our part. And I think that's what this presentation was about today. But it's also about how do we support and encourage other jurisdictions across the region to also do their part. And that is what I'm focused on in the Regional Equitable Housing Subcommittee, is to create those tools and their mechanisms for jurisdictions that are not just our unincorporated area, but our cities across the coast to step up and do more. And so to the extent that anyone wants to partner with me on helping our coastal cities and our cities who are maybe not doing their fair share to do more, I would very much welcome your partnership.
Supervisor Anderson, with something that hasn't already been said.
No, I'm not going to rehash.
you.
So are we moving ahead with the housing or not?
We can work, it's not appropriate to add to this item, but we can work on docketing a workshop.
I just need
figuring
that
out how we can do that. So,
clarification.
yeah, yes, I think we can definitely schedule some more time to talk some more about housing and figure out what the structure of that is. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. All right, motion by Vice Chair Vargas, seconded by myself. Ask the clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. Supervisor Anderson.
Aye.
Supervisor Lawson-Remer. Aye. Supervisor Desmond.
Aye.
Vice Chair Vargas. Chair Fletcher.
Fletcher, aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.